Hello, everybody. I am very excited to welcome Jane Gleeson-White back again to give us some more guidance on the new moon and full moon that are coming up in December and January this year. I'm sure you've all been experiencing lots of internal changes and shifts. I definitely know I have. And I find these podcasts deeply, deeply helpful in terms of the guidance that they can give us around the collective energy and the energy that's impacting us on levels that we generally don't have much clarity around. And having these guidelines in a way, or these kind of sweeping strokes of understanding, I feel gives me a much deeper sense of the context that I'm operating in. And I found it very comforting, actually, to be honest. So thank you so much, Jane, for all of the guidance that you've offered us so far. I'm really excited to hear what, December and January have in store for us.
Thank you so much, Kay, for having me here once again on your wonderful podcast. It's such fascinating energy to work with. And it's interesting that you find it comforting, because the moon is very much about comfort. It's our emotional selves. I was thinking back to the first podcast that we did, where I spoke more about why we might be interested in looking at the moon in its sort of annual or its monthly cycles. And this particular pair of moons seems very significant in light of that, because we have a new moon in Capricorn on the 23rd of December. And that's a sort of one of its main symbols is the father. And then we have a new moon in January on the 7th of January. And that's the mother archetype. And the moon actually rules Cancer. And so we have this sort of parent energy, and obviously a lot of our early early emotional development has come from whatever mother and father figures we had around us as children. So these two moons give us the opportunity to reflect on our inner parenting styles, self-parenting, our inner father and our inner mother, and how we might, change them or allow them to grow as we have grown, and maybe leave behind some of those old patterns from our childhood. So it feels, these feel always like very important moons, the Cancer and Capricorn axis, the 4th sign and the 10th sign of the zodiac, Cancer being the 4th sign and the first water sign. So it's hugely emotional energy. And Capricorn is the 10th sign, and it's the last earth sign. So it's all about structure and wisdom. Yeah, it's earth wisdom. Yeah, so we'll just start there. It's about parents.
Yeah, and which obviously is such a potent topic given the time of year that we're at. As we're all about to go into the festive season, and I should think for most of us spend that time with family. So. And that's always, I know from my experience, whenever I go back to England for Christmas with the folks, or when they come to visit me here, that's when I see my inner child, come straight up to the surface, and all these old patterns come and reveal themselves. So, yeah, it makes so much sense that this is the energy that's around us at this time.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting about old patterns being triggered around this time. Absolutely. And just to focus on the new moon on the 23rd of December, so 2 days before Christmas and right after the really powerful solstice, which in Sydney is on the 22nd of December. I know in the Northern Hemisphere it's on the 21st. But yeah, so it's, as I was saying last time, this is the beginning of a real speeding up in the energies, in the sort of cosmic astrological energies. And this new moon is part of that, the new moon in Capricorn, because it's in conversation with Jupiter, which is a planet we talked a lot about last time because it rules Sagittarius. And it's beginning a new 12-year cycle. So Jupiter has a 12-year cycle through all the different signs. It spends about a year in each sign. And it's literally just gone into Aries, which is the first sign of the zodiac. So this is all about this new self that we might feel we're becoming as a result of, especially these last few years since January 2020, because this moon also speaks a little bit to that moment, and we might get new insights, new ways of thinking about how these last 3 years have gone for us, in what ways we've changed, you know, and how we've grown and developed, and you know, new ways of looking at this new self that may have been born during these years, which I think is true for you and definitely true for me, and I think true for a lot of people. These years have given us opportunity to reflect on things that we haven't, you know, it's caused us to stop and reflect, I think, apart from all the people on the front line, I must always say.
It actually astonishes me how, you know, in sync, you know, I feel in with the energies that are being described around the moon. I mean, it's such a, I never appreciated how intrinsically the energy of the moon affected me. Never had any appreciation of that until we started doing these podcasts, because what you have described to me, I mean, what we're going to discuss in more detail, what we've already discussed prior to hitting record, is, you know, a lot of what is already true for me in this moment. And it astounds me actually that, you know, the moon has such a profound effect on all of us, and we're so ignorant of it. So it's talking to initiation energy, particularly over the last 3 years, is something that 100% I've personally experienced, and know that a lot of clients have too. Just, you know, going through this massive cleansing and recalibration and observing oneself in a completely new light. So please carry on.
and also a lot of release as well. You know, there's been so much release in the last year. I mean, those eclipses, you know, we were talking a lot about release there, letting go of old stuff. So it feels that we've really done a lot of that, and that this is, you know, so we're getting much more in touch with this new person, this new being that we're becoming. And given that, you know, the 12-year Jupiter cycle, it's good to reflect back on where you were in June 2010 and January 2011, because that was when the last Jupiter cycle began. And usually the next Jupiter cycle will be some kind of spiraling up of that, or some kind of, you know, development of whatever 12-year cycle we've just been through. I mean, I know for me, it was incredible to look back on that, because I started my PhD in 2010, and that set me on a path that I definitely, you know, towards considering the value of nature and its place in the world, and how we, you know, abuse it and so on. And now I'm finding myself working much more closely with plants. So I see that as definitely one of the many things that has been part of my 12-year Jupiter cycle. So it doesn't matter how big or small these things are, but, you know, the resonances are just extraordinary. So it's, this new moon is giving us an opportunity to create new structures and ways of, especially ways of using our time that will support this new being that we might feel that we're coming into touch with. And I know, Kay, for you, it's really really clear that you have this sort of whole new way of being. And, you know, and for any, you know, and for any new enterprise that we want to embark on, we need to create structures and routines in our day. You know, we need to think about how we're using our time and how we're disciplining ourselves during the day to actually act on this new vision that we might have for how we might, you know, whatever new project we might have, or whatever new self we might feel needs expression.
Yeah, I'd like to talk to that a little bit, because yes, you're absolutely right. I have been personally experiencing this in a very profound way. And I've also observed it with clients too, in a lot of them saying, you know, I know what I want to be, but having quite, you know, a lot of conflict, internal conflict around how that journey is going to unfold, and feeling this sense of obligation around what they should or shouldn't be doing. I guess there's inner parents going nuts within them, you know, and at least I just want to share that in my own personal experience with this unfolding I'm witnessing of myself, really stepping into a version of myself which I had completely not expected. I have come to a place of, every time I think about the nature of this journey and how these things are all going to happen, I actually surrender to a place of trust. I don't know how, and that's okay. So that's been my pathway, which is, I'm just going to allow this to unfold through me, because I think this can be something we can easily get caught up in. And it's this sense of, I have this job to do. And, and in that, our egos can get quite quickly entangled with this sense of self-importance. And so I've been trying to be as attentive as possible to a broader understanding that, what is to unfold is something that's moving through me, and the artistry of life moves through me. And so the more I surrender and trust that it will unfold in all the right ways, the easier that passage will be. And so far, where I have employed that approach, it's actually proven to be exactly that. And where I have not been able to use that approach because of old patterns within myself, where I've witnessed conflict, that has created conflict in the outcome, or not conflict, but challenge in the outcome. And so it's really awesome, when you got to, and self-work is such a trial and error experience. And so now I'm like, well, this has worked, this whole just trusting. So I'm just going to employ that across the board now, and, continually working with those internal patterns that are coming up, but as we all are. And I think it's really good to own that we're all walking through these patterns in varying degrees and reconditioning ourselves. So yes, I think it's really important to have that structure and allow that structure to be birthed within you, rather than old conditioning to, you actually said this to me once, Jane. You said, I feel, Kay, that sometimes you use the old paradigm of your corporate world and you impose it on the way that you show up with your spiritual self.
Did I?
Nailed me.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because Capricorn also rules our professional lives and our jobs, when you spoke about that. So it's also about redefining all of the ways that we think about that. I mean, because professional lives have transformed hugely in the last 3 years as well. And we can sort of open our minds to, your spiritual, what would you call it, channeling or whatever is going to be your profession, so these are new things that are becoming possible. But yeah, what was interesting in what you were saying is, so these, like, to try something new, often we have old patterns of, you're not allowed to do that, or why would you do that? Or we have, I think for myself, teachers going, oh, you can't do that, or parents going, you can't do that, but you still want to do that thing. You still have this urge to, for me, it's painting always. And, this moment, this new moon is about just trusting ourselves. It is a lot about trust, but it's also really about, it's very practical. It's sort of like practical love. Like, how can you support yourself in the best possible way for this new thing that you want to bring into being? So yes, you are trusting whatever comes through you, and you're also setting up structures in the world to bring people together, events, and so we need real world material structures to embody these new practices or ways of being that we want to develop,
right?
Because it's really like a brand new seed of ourselves. And there is a lot of ego in this as well. It's about ego because it's Jupiter in Aries, which is I am, and it's the moon in Capricorn, which is, your legacy, your career, your achievements, your public kind of success. So that's a lot of quite masculine energy and very kind of, much part of our bigger culture that likes achievement and success and go get them, so you can get caught up in all of that kind of dynamic. And this is about thinking about how we use it in new ways that might be more true to whatever these new professional beings are that we want to create, and also these new or this new 12-year cycle of how we want to be in the world.
Right. Yeah. I think there's it's the I am energy that you mentioned is always really fascinating to me, because I always thought of that as a very sort of power over energy rather than a power with energy. And from what you're saying, it's really moving out of that paradigm of power over into really embracing and understanding that we're far stronger working with others. And you're absolutely right in terms of, like, as much as I have been doing the trusting on the one side, on the other side, I've been actively collaborating with people in new ways and seeking out new networks, which is something I've never done in the past. So there's always that masculine, feminine balance in what we're doing, I suppose. And I feel it's actually getting, I think it's actually, to be honest, becoming really able to observe very clearly what your driving force is and where it's coming from within you, so that, because those old conditioning, those old patterns of our parents growing up, when we can really hone in on, oh, this desire to do X, Y, Z is actually coming from that place, as opposed to a place of genuine heart-led desire within myself. And I think it's really creating this profound level of clarity within yourself around, where are my wants and my desires coming from? Are they coming from heart-led me, or are they coming from a wounding, a past limitation or belief that has been conditioned to me over my childhood? And I think the more that we start paying attention to our drivers, the easier that becomes for us to identify.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting way of putting it, because at this new moon, it's more about, there's a lot of energy with our actual desires, like our own unique inner desires. And it's not so much the desire that might seem like somebody else's or inherited from our parents. It's more the voice in us that might be like the inner father. And we're still talking about the Capricorn new moon. So that's very much the inner father, the cultural father, what we're allowed to do, in the world. And it's more of that voice that we might have still inside us. Like, where do you, slag yourself off? Where are you self-critical? Where are you stopping yourself from doing what your heart wants to do? It's more about that energy. So it's not necessarily about the impulse, because that's probably going to be more clear. It's how you can support that impulse as a sort of wise inner voice of a very supportive father figure, authority figure, because I feel in the broader culture, I mean, basically, models of parenting can be pretty toxic, like abusive and domineering and collapsed mothers. I mean, for all good reasons, that we've lived in a very, repressive culture, and no one's been very well parented, our own parents included. So nothing personal about any parents. I think, I'm a parent myself. So, but I think we all need to do a lot of that internal rethinking about, that voice in our head, the inner critic. That's the sort of Capricorn energy that I'm talking about. That's a new moon. How can we use that voice more supportively, because we need an inner critic, and we need the limit setter, and we need the person who's going to kind of pull us in line and say, but what are the consequences of that decision? And have you thought about this? And, that long-term thing, that long-term planning. So we definitely need that voice, but we don't need it to be the repressive voice that's going to stop us from doing anything new and adventuring into the world. So often we have that voice in our head because it's kept us safe in unsafe situations when we're young. But as I was saying in the very first podcast, we're now adults. Presumably everyone listening to this is an adult, and so often our emotional energy is still caught in those old habits. And because this is the Capricorn moon, that's the emotional energy around how we might have felt that we were fathered, either by a father or by teachers or the culture, and anything that felt critical and repressive and authoritarian and stopped us from doing what we wanted to do.
Well, yeah, I think, it's such an interesting area in terms of, being very clear about your drivers, because I remember a girlfriend of mine, we talked about, she's coming to a lot of awareness that she has found it very difficult to kind of sit still, because she actually grew up with a father that was slightly on the spectrum, and his way of navigating that was basically by keeping busy. And so she has had a lot of unknown to her anxiety driving her behaviors. So she would wake up and say, I want to go for a surf. But what she's realized is that actually her body's tired and she needed to rest. So you see, it's like, I feel really, when we're tuning into where even our desires are coming from, like, are they coming from a place of love or fear? Because and really honing in on that helps us get really clear on actually what is true for us. And when we become attuned to that, then we automatically emancipate ourselves from those 3D parental conditions that we had placed on us growing up, because we start to see, I rush a lot because my mum only ever said to me, I'm leaving in 5 minutes, you're either ready or you're not. That was my upbringing. And so I've spent a lot of my life like feeling like I have to be quick. Even to this day, I'll turn around to my husband and say, I've just got to go to the loo. It's like just being the word that I'm now really aware of, because that's me not giving myself as much time as I need to go to the loo, but rushing to go to the loo. So these are all the things that I have become really aware of to observe my parental conditioning versus, well, how long do you want to be in the loo for, Kay?
Well,
so it's really, I feel this is such a powerful episode, because reparenting ourselves is where freedom comes from, in my experience. And weirdly, 12 years ago, I moved to Australia. I landed in Australia. I had left my family in England. So I think that was the journey of me starting to reparent Kay, unbeknownst to me, and now coming into the fullness of this. And in the last few years, really coming into contact with what I now call mother, father, spirit, who are, spirit energy is my parents. Like, that source energy is the source of me. So that is actually my true parent. And that's where I go for help now. That's where I'm like, okay, I'm not sure. Show me the answer. And then I've learned to trust and let things unfold, versus calling my parents and seeing them, as we talked earlier, like as more of a, older brother or sister. Like, I love you, you're kind of annoying sometimes, but that's okay, because and having that kind of relationship. But what that involves is actually taking profound ownership of yourself, which is very confronting for most people. We're used to, as much as we moan about our parents, we actually project a lot of our stuff onto them. And it's their fault I'm like this. But when we start to take ownership of all our stuff, it's not their fault. It's me that's perpetuating that conditioning. So it's actually us taking responsibility for it. So what a powerful, powerful time.
Yeah, and interesting. Yeah, absolutely. Interesting, the example you gave of your friend with surfing, because that sounds like, yes, it might have felt like a desire to her, but also that sounds like a habit that she's just adopted, this habitual way of behaving, because that's what the energy was in her house, or that was, how she perceived her father. So given that we're talking about the moon, and, so these are old habits of talking to ourselves, and yes, it's about trust, and it's very practical energy. It's much more about how do you use your time in the day? Do you if you want to, in the next 6 months, achieve something, create a new project, set an intention for what you want to do for the next 6 months, what steps do you have to take in order to do that? So it's really about, if, for example, if I want to write a book, I have to sit down at my desk for about 4 hours a day with, the writing, the book, so it's about long-term projects and how we support ourselves each day to, get down to work, because it's about our careers and our achievements and new projects that we might have. So yeah, it's, I mean, what you're talking about is true in relation to this moon, but it's very much more practical. And so yes, it's about the inner father and the ways that we might criticize ourselves and stop ourselves from doing things, but this particular energy of the Capricorn new moon is about the way we structure our lives to support ourselves to do what we want to do. So for me, in relation to you, it's about the way that you've created these events, so yes, it's about the relationships, but it's more about the structures in your time where you can bring people together to actually do this new profession that you're walking into, so to speak. Do you understand?
Yeah, it's like, like basically employing your divine masculine energy, really, the divine masculine is always, nurturing the environment in which the divine feminine can flourish, and so creating the structure, creating the safety, creating the the sense of place, and that sounds like what you're creating emphasis around is that aspect, like respecting our desires enough to give them the support they need to flourish.
Absolutely. Perfect. Yes.
Amazing. Yeah, I think that's especially in the spiritual space, that's a very helpful thing to be reminded of, because I think, I know that in my time I've definitely got way more preoccupied with spending a lot of time in other realms rather than the 3D one that actually, is going to support a lot of physical manifestation. So I think it's worth keeping that in mind, that balance of action as well as intention is really important.
And that's the perfect word, because it's very much about manifesting energy. It's very much about, cosmic laws, the law of gravity. It's, it's about limits and boundaries. Where do we have to, where are we limiting ourselves unnecessarily, and where do we need to limit ourselves so that, I just don't go dreaming all day long instead of writing a book, so it's about creating those structures and limits, the safe sort of boundaries. Yeah, because we need a structure to inhabit this earthly realm. We can't just, if we were just spirits, we wouldn't be here. So yeah, it's very much about that energy, which is very beautiful energy, and it can seem austere and boring, and to talk about rules and regulations and limits, but it's about us finding what works for ourselves. What of those, like, do you want to start a daily meditation practice, or a daily yoga practice, or a daily writing practice, or how,
really, isn't it? It's a commitment to...
Absolutely. And it's about long term.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really sensible, it's wise, it's about elders, it's about karma, things have consequences. So yeah, it's very much about the earthly realm.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's I was actually talking to someone about this over the weekend at this festival I was doing an event at, and we talked about the importance of, it's a Buddhist philosophy, I'm pretty sure, right word, right thought to right action, and just, this is another way of really ensuring that alignment of self, and that is really being attentive to the words that you're using, the way that you're thinking about things, and then the way that you behave. I mean, these are things that if one of those things is out of alignment, what comes back to you is not going to be satisfying, and the experience of it is not going to be satisfying because it's out of alignment. And so it's really, tuning all those things into a place of authenticity, actually, and having courage to do that, because generally the reason that we are out of alignment is because we're fearful in some way of speaking our truth, or of showing up in a way that we think might upset other people, or whatever it is, and or not backing ourselves, and not then putting the effort in for ourselves. So yeah, it's a very, I think a lot of people can be challenged by the idea of structure, but I think it's worth, reframing that sense of constraint into a place of self-respect, actually.
And not even restraint, more support, I mean, like a building needs, it's not restraining anything, it's supporting it. So it's very much about how we think of structure as a way of supporting ourselves, and creating, and it's not really about habits, that's more Virgo, but it still is about how do we use our time every day. It's very much about time. Reflect on how we use our time, how do we waste time. Capricorn energy is very much about simplifying and getting down to the basics. It can be quite austere, but it's about what's really essential. What's essential in your day. Where are you wasting time? Are you going to allow yourself to waste some time? Because sometimes that can be really good, so. But also when you mentioned courage, I mean, there's a lot of courage at the time of this new moon, and it's a lot of initiatory energy. So, I mean, it's a fantastic moon, and it's just about working out where your impulse, what you want to do, needs to be structured within sort of the laws of gravity and the laws of physics and the laws of karma and the cosmos. Yeah. So it's about finding that relationship, which is.
Yeah, can I ask, before we step into the full moon, because there is this solstice, the 21st, 22nd, what bearing does that have on this new moon energy?
Well, it has, because it's so close to it, has a lot of similar planetary energy. And it's about new beginnings. Like, this is a time of such new beginnings. The solstice is even more, because the solstice is the first day that the sun goes into Capricorn. So it's at 0 degrees Capricorn. So it's even more energizing this energy I've been talking about of the Jupiter cycle. And it's also, there's just a whole lot of initiatory new energy in this solstice and the new moon. And it's some of the spiritual commentators that I listen to see this solstice, I mean, it always is a portal, sort of an entry point, a doorway through which we walk into the new season. And this one is a particularly powerful one. So, for those people who listen to this podcast who are on spiritual paths, and I'm sure many of you are, this is a really powerful kind of moment for that, like a doorway into a new kind of world type energy. And the new moon is inviting us to find new ways to structure our lives to support this new energy that's coming in. And it's also, back to the new moon quickly, on the same day, the wounded healer, which is an asteroid I've mentioned, Chiron, in some of these podcasts, has been in introverted energy for the last 5 months. And so it's been a lot about reflecting on where our wounds are, or our vulnerabilities. And they've been, if not healed, I'm not sure about that word healing, but we've had a lot of opportunity to reflect on them and feel them and work with them. And that energy is going direct on the same day as new moon, which means that maybe we'll be feeling more at ease with where we found, our vulnerabilities and our sensitive spots, our wounds, and being able to take that into the world in a more empowered way, just have more courage around where we're vulnerable, because that's a really powerful way to be in the world, to be able to be vulnerable.
Yeah, amazing. It's interesting, when I was tuning into the solstice, because I'm running this event on it, I got a very clear indication around this being a very powerful portal, like almost like a time loop, like you could step through it and just be catapulted into a very new paradigm for yourself. And there was a lot of heart energy around it. Would that be true in terms of an astrological?
Well, just in general, it's that same Taurus North Node, there's heart energy. I mean, that's the big shift that's happening. And it's really emphasized until the middle of next year. So absolutely. It's not particularly emphasized at this new moon, unless it's about finding new ways to think about your values, you know, or not even to think about them, new visions for what your values are. And it is all about the heart energy. So that's probably the best way to think of it in terms of this particular full moon, new moon, and also in terms of the solstice. How can you reimagine your ways, your values and sense of self-value and self-esteem? It's very much about that, and especially related to the earth and the heart. Yeah, so it's all about love and Mother Earth. It's that really earthy energy that I keep going back to, which is strongly emphasized. So maybe that's what you were tuning into. But I mean, I just think everything about this time of change is an invitation to be more and more in our heart.
That's it. And I feel that, my sense was that as a heart activation experience, we would be supported in moving into that next version of ourselves, because we would have so much more expansive energy within ourselves to hold space for it, as opposed to that, that inner critic. So it was, it felt like a powerful opportunity to sit in the heart space and really expand that sense of self-acceptance and self-empowerment.
Yeah, and that's actually a really beautiful other way of thinking about this new moon, because it's such initiatory energy, to think about it also as an allowing of space. So, make time in your day where that you can meditate or can reflect, do have time out from all the busyness and allow yourself to be in the unknown, because all change is about going into the unknown, and it's about creating the time and space for that to happen, and to not be afraid of it, because another downside of Capricorn is fear. Saturn can be fearful, but there's a lot of courage as well. So, we don't necessarily like change. We don't necessarily like to go into the unknown. So, allow yourself to be in the unknown at this time of year. It's the end of a whole year. Reflect on where you've been and how much you've changed, and what you can release, and make space for the new.
Yeah, absolutely. Exciting times.
And it's the last new moon of the year, so
And so then we move into January.
And then we move into the full moon in Cancer on the 7th of January, Saturday, the 7th of January, 2023. That's at 10 a.m. And this is so much about mother energy, and it's about our deepest emotional selves, our deepest intuitive selves, our unconscious. So it's a lot about the self that we're hardly even familiar with. It's our most private self. So if Capricorn rules our most public self, our careers, Cancer rules our deepest, most private self, the self we are at home when no one else is around. And it does also rule the domestic sphere and the home. And this moon is, well, first of all, it will illuminate whatever kind of new emotional patterns were set up 6 months ago, which for me was incredibly interesting to reflect upon. So look back to June 2022 and reflect on how you have emotionally matured, or what you might have initiated then. For me, I know that I gave a eulogy for my mother's brother, so that was a really powerful moment. And so this moon will illuminate whatever emotional patterns and energies.
That was the new moon in June 2022, which is now coming to fruition as the full moon.
Did I say the new moon will illuminate that?
Oh no, I was just reiterating for
So this full moon now will shed light on your emotional kind of terrain over the last 6 months. And also it's in a stressful aspect to Mercury, which is how we think, and our, it's the planet of communication. And so we might experience this as a lot of self-criticism or criticism of others, very judgmental energy in the Mercury, and, you know, or very emotional energy. So we can sort of swing between being judgmental and critical and very emotional. And I think it's about working with, you know, how we can observe our emotions and allow our full emotional beings to be present without too much judgment. Because I think that's quite difficult.
Yeah, I think I think that's the key though, really. That's, you know, when I really understood self-love, it was when I came into the profound understanding that it was about accepting every single part of me. Not just, you know,
because this is really vulnerable energy as well, and it's our tiny, you know, most elemental child selves in relation to our mothers, you know. So it can be very attached energy, it can be, you know, very secretive. It's, you know, Cancer is the crab, so it's where we protect ourselves, our deepest, softest selves. And, you know, always this energy plays out in the world. You might be critical of other people, they might be judgmental of you for whatever emotions you're expressing. And for me, always the best way to work with it is internally, you know, like whatever emotions are being triggered for you, how are you self-judging? Like, as you were saying, like what really vulnerable, shameful part of you are you shaming or judging? That's, I think, the most empowering way to work with the energy.
That's taking ownership. So
yeah,
you know, when we really step into that place of recognizing that nothing's actually being done to us, as hard as that can be to understand, but you know, all our triggers are just simply our own insecurities or misbeliefs, misunderstandings that are being highlighted through the behavior or the situation, the behavior of others around us or the situation that we're in. And the more that we can take ownership of that, the more that we actually step out of our very human wounded self and more into our soul-led self, you know. And I know that for me, that's been a really big experience in terms of really observing when I oscillate from my very kind of, oh, but what about me energy to all is well, I understand this, you know, and seeing it from this broader perspective. And ownership of our triggers and the recognition that the people around us are our teachers, not our punishers, it's a big step to make. You know, it's a very, you know, victimhood's so attractive. We are trained to attach ourselves to victimhood. And that's really what the unconditioning is. It's us detaching ourselves from the entitlement that being a victim gives us of, you know, not taking ownership of our own discomfort. And so, yeah, it takes a tremendous amount of self-discipline and courage to actually really start saying to yourself, actually, no, I'm not angry with my mother-in-law. Because she wants this to happen for Christmas. I'm actually sad within myself because I feel that, you know, my mother-in-law might take more attention than I'll get from my partner, whatever the reason is. You know, once we start dropping deeply into ourselves, I use that example because that's actually the first time I started taking ownership for my own stuff, was years ago, probably 2017, that Christmas, 2016, 2017. And I had been coming into this awareness of, I really need to start taking ownership of my triggers, which was fine to a degree up until it got really personal. And it was Christmas, and my mother-in-law wanted us all to go to hers. And I was like really resistant to it. And I was about to turn around to my husband and say, well, she can't tell us what we should or shouldn't do. And I caught myself and I asked myself, Kay, why are you really angry? And it was actually because I felt that I would just be abandoned in this Christmas celebration, because in that situation, I didn't feel valued. And And it was, you know, I was walking the beach with my husband, and 1 minute I was like, ah, this, that, and the other. And then I'd gone really quiet. And so from his perspective, he was like, what's happening? Are you okay? And actually, it was me for the first time taking ownership of my own shit. And I turned around to him then and I went, it's fine, we can go to your mother's. Because I had really acknowledged it was my stuff I needed to work through. So it's challenging. It's a practice.
You said, yeah, that's a perfect example. And so briefly for me, I find it the best way to work, because you can actually change things, you know, like you can change how you treat yourself and you can change how you behave. You can't really change how other people behave. So it just seems like, you know, a very constructive, creative way of working with it. But you said probably the two key words for these two moons, which is self-discipline, which is very much about the Capricorn. You know, it's all about self-discipline in the best possible way, and abandonment, you know, and that is so much the Cancer full moon. That is so much, you know, because we're talking about our earliest emotional beings, which, you know, are so often abandoned, you know, those feelings. Like that's probably one of the most primal core wounds that we can have, that sense of abandonment in whatever way it's manifested in our own lives, and how that can keep echoing through our lives until we stop one day, as you did, and you did not abandon yourself. You sort of caught yourself, and in that moment of self-discipline, which is really what it was, like snap yourself out of it and bring yourself around. That's so much about what this is about. And so if we're thinking about this full moon in relation to this stressful aspect with Mercury, it is exactly about that, like talking ourselves around in a responsible, caring way when we're feeling abandoned or so emotionally vulnerable. And almost, if we're adults now, which I'm sure all your listeners are, to remind ourselves that we are adults and we're not abandoned and we're no longer that child. And, you know, yeah, that can be really hard because that child has a really big crab shell on that, you know, has been used to protect us.
Well, that's where energy work is so powerful, because once you learn how to work with your feelings, and, you know, let's be really clear, your feelings and your emotions are your energy. When you know how to work with energy work, that's code for, you know, how to work constructively with the way that you feel inside your body. And, you know, I think the clearer we are around understanding how powerful our emotions are and the impact they have on the way that we show up socially, but also the impact on the way that we feel within our bodies physically. You know, so many people walk around with back pain or shoulder pain or neck pain and it's all emotionally created. And, you know, the shock, horror and miraculousness that they think they've witnessed when all they've done is clear an emotional block and then all of a sudden their back doesn't hurt. It's, you know, it's just consistently understanding that you are an incredible being and that your body is communicating to you through your feelings all the time. And it's about us valuing that enough to take the time to listen.
Yeah, this is all about feelings and the communication, the way they might communicate with us. But it's also, you know, so apart from that bit of the full moon, it's also beautifully in tune with spirit and cosmic energy. So very flowing, you know, so Cancer also rules our intuition, which is, you know, our gut instincts and our connection with the divine, spirit, cosmos, whatever, the universe, however you would like to call it. And so the more that we honor and allow our emotional beings, the more we tune in to spirit. So there's a beautiful connection here between the cosmos and our emotional beings. So, you know, we might have amazing illuminations about our spiritual beings and our, not even our purpose, just our connection with the cosmos. It's beautiful energy, you know, it's very watery energy. So another good time to be by the ocean or to be in water, and it's summer. So, but yeah, it's very, very ethereal, ephemeral, spiritual, intuitive energy at this full moon.
Beautiful. Well, I can't wait for that, because I know I'll really enjoy it.
And also very beautifully tuned into that heart energy that we were talking about earlier, which is this sort of collective path until the middle of next year, which is tuning much more into the earth and into our hearts. And of course, it's sort of the same thing.
Yeah. And, you know, if any of the listeners really struggle with that, it's that one of the best practices I can recommend you start with is, instead of, you know, moving through your day from a place of what do you think, actually really moving through your day from a place of how do I feel? And just making that switch can have a really profound effect on your connection with your emotional self, which will in turn lead you to your spiritual self. I actually had a girlfriend go and sit in a plant medicine ceremony. I won't get into plant medicine on this podcast, but it's definitely something that I will talk about going forward. However, she came back and she said to me, Kay, she said, I keep crying at everything. Apparently she saw 5 older gentlemen on a bike dressed as Santa Claus on a bike ride yesterday, because we're here in Australia, it's hot weather. And they were all in their shorts, t-shirts, and had Santa hats and big beards on. And she said, and I just burst into tears. And she's like, everything is making me cry. This is an extremely smart woman who works for a very international, prestigious company. And I said to her, how fascinating, because your safe place is your intellectual self. And she said, it's so funny you say that, because throughout the experience with the plant medicine, it was like I wasn't allowed to think. Wow. And so what happened was she was forced into her heart. And that was where she was experiencing all this overwhelm, because it was a place that she was not familiar with. She hadn't given herself permission to really sit with her feelings as powerfully as she now could. And she said, you know, I was going down to go to the ceremony, and I felt so confident, and I really wanted to increase my connection with spirit. And I was like, well, you got everything you asked for. You know? And that's it. It's people so often say, I really want to connect with my spiritual self-care. I really want to connect with my intuition. And then I'll say, well, how do you feel about X, Y, Z? Oh, I don't really know how I feel about that. And it's like, well, your feelings, that's a golden ticket.
That's such a perfect example for these moons, because that career, you know, all that energy put into that Capricorn outward career, successful self, at the expense of that emotional self. And it is about the heart, but this Cancer energy is really much more about the gut. So it's even, you know, so it's beautifully aligned with the heart energy at this full moon, but the actual emotional energy that we're talking about is even deeper. You know, it's that sacral chakra, it's really the gut. And Cancer rules the stomach and food. And, you know, so often, I mean, I've caught myself doing this myself. You know, suddenly I'll get this urge to rush down to the kitchen and eat something, and I've just started to go, and why did I just do that? Did something just make me uncomfortable? Was that just emotionally charged? And sure, you know, it's such a fascinating way for me to, you know, become more conscious of what I might be feeling unbeknownst to myself, because that's the Cancer energy. We often don't even know what we're feeling, you know, because it's so submerged, not just because we suppress it, but because that's the nature of these really deep feelings. You know, this is our roots. This is ancestral stuff. This is ancient.
Yeah. Oh, food. That's a big one.
Yeah. So the stomach, and we often suppress our feelings by eating, you know, that can be a connection. So I love that, that she had that experience, because I also note plant medicine, you ingest it. And so it works from that really sort of elemental level beyond her. So she can't control it anymore. It's working from within.
That's it. Yeah. Which is why it's so powerful, because it renders you mute in terms of your resistance, you know, and that's, you know, you're put into a complete place of supplication. And actually that's, to be honest, I won't get into this too much because it's such a big area, but that is where people have so much difficulty with plant medicine, is because they are not allowing themselves to surrender. And that was my one piece of advice to her, was whatever you do, surrender. Because if you try to fight, it will do everything it can to help you let go of that resistance. And if that involves purging, as in being sick or whatever, that's what will happen. So, you know, if you're going on a plant medicine journey and you want to have a relatively gentle physical experience, at least, surrender.
And that could be, you know, the motto of the full moon,
right?
You know, because it is a lot about well, it's being in conversation with that judgmental self that she might have had, who, you know, the career person who wasn't comfortable with her emotions or whatever. I mean, without making it too much of a cartoon, too caricatured. But now this moon is about surrender and is about release and is about trust, and you know, to allow our emotions to come up and trust that they're going to inform us of what we need to know, you know, because as you say, that's where a lot of information is that we've kept hidden from ourselves.
Yeah, the yogis say all the answers are within you, and they are not lying. That's exactly where I have found all my answers. It's been within me and continues to be within me. So yes, when you learn how to drop into yourself, it's amazing what is revealed to you. Wowza. Well, I feel like we've covered a lot there, which is really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, just to sort of conclude, I would say about these two moons,
yeah,
and I think we've already said it really clearly, but really it is about so the Cancer full moon is about unconditional love. It's just supporting ourselves and allowing ourselves to be our emotional beings in our fullest ways, whatever comes up. And especially in the aftermath of Christmas and the new year, you know, it can be a really slumpy time, the 7th of January, you know. So if you're feeling emotional, then just allow that and unconditionally love yourself. And then at the new moon in December, really reflect on how you can support yourself and whatever new self is coming into being, or new project, or, you know, new burst of energy. Just create the structures for the next 6 months to allow, even if it's just a little project, like you want to start painting, which is what I am doing, you know, just allow yourself some time in the day, just, you know, and it's no judgment. You don't have to be the best. It's not about any of that. It's just about supporting yourself to be in that unknown, to be an initiate. And initiates, they're beginners, you know. Allow yourself to be in that beginner energy.
That's it. Yeah, 100% agree. My internal realization, surrender and initiation has been around becoming aware of my ability to channel the higher realms. And so I have been doing that every morning, basically. Just the first thing I do, I wake up and I go and I allow that to just move through me. And that's it. I couldn't agree more, Jane. It's just creating that commitment to yourself, actually, is how I've decided to view that, because, you know, it's an ultimate level of self-respect and honoring. You know, this is something that's calling to my heart, therefore I will prioritize it and really welcome it into my life. And then just seeing the fruits of that labor flower, you know, is really beautiful. You know, that's the karma that comes back.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's the planting of the seeds. And exactly as you say, it's you know, that is a structure that you've created to allow this new thing to come through, as in every morning you're going to practice it. That's absolutely this energy. So yeah, take that into your new moon on the 23rd of December. And, you know, who knows what will happen at the full moon in Capricorn next year, in 6 months' time, you know. Where will you be, everybody, with your new habits and structures?
Yeah, it's really work. You know, you really inspire me to keep a diary, which is something I've never really been drawn to do. But, you know, when you start to work with moon energy in this way, and being able to reflect 6 months ago or 6 months forward, you know, when you move 6 months forward and are able to look back at this point, having that diary, you know, where you were, is probably a really beautiful extension to your experience.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So fascinating.
Yeah, so I guess if you're really passionate about really, you know, weaving moon energy into your lifestyle, it's probably worth, you know, investing in a 2023 diary for starters. you know, really bringing that into your life experience. Thank you so much, Jane, again, for all your pearls of wisdom. Really appreciate it. And, you know, I know even when you were talking about the full moon in Cancer and how it could be emotional and, you know, bringing up a few things, and just having that awareness is going to make that time so much easier, you know. And this is what I've continually experienced because of these sessions we've had, that every time, and we've had some really challenging times the last few months, you know, and just having this greater context has made the experience so much easier to navigate. So profound gratitude again for all of
thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, I should also, I mean, the full moon is also very beautiful because it's beautifully connected to heart energy and earth energy and sort of cosmic energy. So there's lots of beautiful things. But yeah, I mean, you know, thank you, Kay. This has been fascinating for me as well. You know, I love doing this, and each month reflecting on these two moons in a way that I can speak about them in plain language, I hope.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, you know, of course, thank you for your invitation, and I look forward to the next one, which will be all about our creative beings and our collaborations.
Exciting times. That sounds good. Well, I will say goodbye to everybody, but before I actually fully sign off, if you would like to receive an energy transmission for the Solstice event, I will be sending out an email with an invitation for that. So if you haven't already gone to my website and signed up for newsletters, then please do. My website is www.kaywilson.love, or if you would like a personal session with me to support you with any of this, or you want to connect more deeply with your spiritual self and would like to directly connect with your spirit guides or guardian angels, then please do reach out at hello@kaywilson.love, or again, go to the website and just book in a session. Thank you so much, Jane, for your time. Thank you all for joining us, sending you lots of love for the festive season, and we will see you in the new year. Take care, everybody.